All right, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this informal work session of the Gun Violence Prevention Commission. We have several presenters today, and so I've made it possible for each presenter to just share from your own screen, which I hope will be helpful. Before we start, I want to thank you all personally. Many of you have been with this since the beginning. When we started the original task force, many of you have served on it. Many of you have been consistent community partners. And the great thing about Roanoke is that we continue to expand our community partners, and we're a city that believes in collaboration. And I really celebrate that because we're all about creating opportunities for people to be healthy, to feel safe, and to thrive in our city. I'm also grateful not only for local community partners and regional, but also statewide partners, several of whom we have on our meeting today. So thank you all for joining us. We've got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to share the screen and
and minimize.
Can you all see this okay? All right. Well, as I said, welcome to our Gun Violence Prevention Commission work session. We are really glad that you're here. I want to begin with stating very clearly our purpose. One of the things that we've realized throughout the time that we've been working on this is that many people are confused by our purpose, but we have always been consistently clear. Our purpose is to gather, review, and study the issue of gun violence within the city of Roanoke, to make recommendations to City Council for potential actions that the city may take to reduce the epidemic of gun violence within our community, and to make recommendations for enhancing existing resources and campaigns, and to aid the city in making and developing community partnerships to assist in the reduction of gun violence. We are not a legislative body. We are a citizen-centric and community-based, solutions-oriented commission and group of community partners focused on prevention and intervention to reduce gun violence in our community. Before I introduce our commissioners, I'd like for us to pause for a moment of silence to remember not only the beloveds who died on April 16th, 2007 at Virginia Tech, but the second slide will indicate neighbors who have lost their lives to gun violence in Roanoke in the last year. So will you please pause with me for a moment of silence? Thank you. This morning, as I said, we have a full agenda. Rather than a roll call, I'm going to introduce our commissioners to you. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to come out of the screen share here for a moment. We have multiple pages, but I'd like for the commissioners who are able to be with us today to wave as I call your name so that folks can see who you are. And if you could just briefly tell us the work you do in the world, in addition to your presence on the commission. And I'm going to go by folks I can see on the screen. So first, I'd like to introduce Decca Knight.
Thank you, Joe. I am the coordinator of trauma-informed care for Roanoke City Public Schools, and I am also a licensed professional counselor.
Thank you, Decca. Elliot Major.
Good morning. I'm Elliot Major, and I deal specifically around reentry, community reentry for those who are incarcerated, returning to the broader community here in Roanoke.
Thank you, Elliot. Tasha Steele.
Hi, I'm Tasha Steele, and I'm vice chair of the commission. And I work for Pearson Education Management, where I help to support states across the United States around issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as social emotional learning, trauma-informed care, and etc.
Thank you, Tasha. Rabbi Kathy Cohen.
Hi, I'm Kathy Cohen. I am the rabbi at Temple Emmanuel, and I've been on the commission since it began, and am so happy to continue this work.
Thank you, Kathy. Nicole Ross.
Good morning. I'm Nicole Ross. I am the logistics coordinator for Paradise Cathedral right at 1301 Melrose Avenue. As a business owner, I support youth, any type of youth services through Youth Enrichment Services of Southwest Virginia, and also our community through Paradise Community Development Center, which is just a program helping young people as well as their families just to live a better life in the community of Roanoke. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Stacy Shepard.
Good morning, Stacy Shepard with CAP, Total Action for Progress, and I'm the Director of Housing and Human Services.
Thank you. Shakira Williams is not able to be with us today due to another work commitment, but she works with our local health department and is doing outreach work today. And Tim Harvey.
Yeah, so Tim Harvey, pastor of Oak Grove Church of the Brethren, been in Roanoke since 2004. Church of the Brethren is one of the 3 historic peace churches in Protestantism. And so issues of peacemaking, reconciliation, justice, service, all very key to who we are as a community of faith.
Thank you, Tim. And I'm Joe Cobb. I'm the chair of the commission, and it's my honor to serve as a member of the Roanoke City Council. And I also serve as a chaplain for Hermitage Roanoke, a senior care community off of Melrose Avenue. So I'm going to go back to our agenda. So this morning, as I said, we have a lot to learn about and share about. We're going to hear in a moment a presentation by Alicia Morrison, who is the senior analyst, crime analyst for ISTAR at Roanoke Police Department. Alicia and the police department have been incredible partners to us through this work, sharing with us important data and updates on their efforts. And so we'll look forward to hearing from Alicia in a moment. Following Alicia, we'll hear from Arwen Quinn, who is the Trauma Outreach Coordinator for Carilion. Arwen's going to talk with us about what happens when someone who is injured in an act of gun violence comes into their trauma center. The work that is done to care for them, for family members, and then the follow-up work that's done. Following that, Chris Turnbull, who is the Senior Director of Corporate Communications and Operational Continuity with Carilion, he's been working with us to develop a marketing and communications plan for the commission, and he's going to share an overview of that. And we intend for that to be very interactive so that we can build out a helpful plan for our community for the years to come. And then following that, we're going to have an interactive conversation about our action plan. We'll look at each of the 5 working group areas, and we want to hear from you as community partners. We're here to listen primarily today, and to hear from you all about points of intersection that you see between the work that we're doing, gaps that you may notice that we need to address, and then steps forward, what you may need from us to continue your support and partnership as we move forward. So at this time, I'm going to invite Alicia Morrison with our police department. Welcome, Alicia. We're so glad that you're here this morning. And I believe you are able to share from your screen, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So for this meeting, it was requested that we review the 2020 year-end statistics that were presented to City Council on April the 5th. So that's how we're going to start off, and then we're going to review the monthly demographic data that we typically review. So first off, we have, this was the citywide Part 1 crime for 2019 compared to 2020. For those that aren't familiar, Part 1 crime is just the terminology we use. This is the information that the Uniform Crime Report with the FBI reports on every year. So it's broken into violent crime versus property crime. And we were down in 2020 compared to 2019 in overall crime. We were down just under 11%. We were down just under 13% in property crimes reported in 2020 compared to 2019, but we were slightly up in violent crime. We were up 16% from 2020 to 2019. The next chart shows the same information, just visualized. So this information is the gun violence incidents from 2018 through 2020. And it shows the blue bars indicate the homicide statistics, the red bars indicate the aggravated assaults, and the purple indicates domestic aggravated assault. As you can see, in 2018, 2019, and 2020, aggravated assaults in which the victim suffered a non-fatal gunshot wound were significantly higher than the domestic aggravated assaults or the fatal gunshot wound related homicides. And then this is a visual map of the gun violence incidents last calendar year in 2020. We had 12 homicides by firearm with a total of 12 victims. We had 48 aggravated assaults in which a individual was struck by a bullet with a total of 60 victims. One of those aggravated assaults was a domestic related incident. And then there were 2 incidents in 2020 in which both offenses occurred. Those are indicated by the blue points on the map. Those incidents were a fatal gunshot wound, which resulted in a homicide for 1 victim, and then at least 1 additional victim that had a non-fatal gunshot wound as well, which was an aggravated assault. And that is just a visual representation of where those incidents geographically occurred within the city. And that is all we have for the 2020 statistics. So moving into the 2021 statistics year to date, this data is accurate through April 14th, which was Wednesday. We have had 3 homicides by firearm. Sorry about that. We've had 3 homicides by firearm with a total of 3 victims. We have had 11 aggravated assaults with a gunshot wound with a total of 17 victims. One of those aggravated assaults was a domestic related incident. And that is the visual representation of where those incidents have occurred so far this year. And then this is the age demographics data. So the top chart displays the age demographics for our known offenders and our victims of gun-related incidents in the city. As you can see, there are only 6 offender statistics available. That is because there are a lot of incidents in which the exact identity of the offender is unknown at this time. They are still under active investigation. And then the bottom chart displays the total number of each incident type compared to the same time frame for 2020. So the top chart shows the total number of offenders or victims, whereas the bottom chart shows the total number of incidents. And we are down in gun-related incidents for 2021 compared to the same time frame in 2020. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Alicia. I'll open it up for questions that folks may have. If you have questions, you can either type those in the chat box, or you can unmute and ask any questions you have. Well, I don't see any questions. I think you've identified a really thorough summary. Alicia, if you could email me that presentation, that way I can include it in our minutes for this work session. That'd be great. And we really appreciate all that you do, not only on our behalf, but on behalf of the city of Roanoke. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Next, we're going to, a question in the chat box. Can we get copies of the map visualizations of ARM? Yes, I will send those out to you because they're part of our public record here. Another question, I don't know if you can answer this, Alicia, is anyone keeping stats on gun sales in Roanoke?
I do not have that information. I can reach out to one of our sworn officers and see if they would have that information. But I personally do not have that information, no, sir.
Okay, well, I think that's an important question, because one of the things that we are concerned about is access to guns, not the legal purchase of them, but predominantly illegal or through theft, and the relationship to the incidents of gun violence. As Ed, who's with our DCJS in the state, that's an important piece of data for us to have. So Alicia, if you have, if that's something that you can find out about regarding gun sales and gun thefts in relation to our effort, that would be helpful. And just whatever you're able to bring forward for us would be appreciated.
I'll see what I can do. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, now we're going to turn to Arwen Quinn. Arwen, we're so glad to have you here today, and we appreciate your work through Carilion and the Trauma Center and Trauma Outreach. I'm going to turn it over to you now to share with us the process that you all follow when someone comes to you with an injury of trauma in general, but specifically gun violence. So welcome.
Thank you. Let's see. Can everybody see?
Yep, we can see it. Do you want to do full screen or?
I'm having trouble seeing it on my screen. Full screen. Sorry.
All right.
Let me get larger. Oh, come on. I'm sorry. Why can't I see it? Glad everybody else can though. Nope, that's not it. Okay.
Do you need to go out and then come back in? I mean, not of the room, but out of to minimize the PowerPoint, escape, and then come back in?
Let's see, is this? All right, are you seeing the full screen now? Is it changed?
It's loading. There we go.
Okay. Okay, so my name is Arwen Quinn. I am the Trauma Outreach Coordinator for Carilion Roanoke Memorial, and I work with trauma services. And trauma, we have been involved with, actively involved with the Roanoke Gun Violence Task Force, as well as efforts to address gun violence outside of the task force. And we decided that it would be beneficial to put together presentations briefly outlining the general experience of what a victim of gun violence experiences when they're going through the hospital system, so that you can get an idea of the resources that they're offered as well within the hospital as well as after the hospital. So a little bit about our trauma center. We've been a designated trauma center since 1983. We have a 700 plus bed facility, 2 trauma bays. And while the emergency department sees upward of 80,000 patients per year suffering from a wide variety of illness and injury, the trauma team is called in for life-threatening multi-system traumatic injuries, which we see about an average of 3,500 of these patients per year. And so you have an idea of the scope of area that we cover. There are 5 level 1 trauma centers in Virginia. The next closest being UVA in Charlottesville, and then Innova in Fairfax, Northern Virginia, Centara in Virginia Beach, and VCU in Richmond. Traumatic injuries are transported from smaller hospitals or the scene to large level 1 trauma centers, because when you suffer an injury and you are treated at a level 1 trauma center, your odds of survival increase by an estimated 20 to 25%. And Carilion is the only level 1 hospital in Southwest Virginia. We serve as a referral center that covers a population of 1.5 million people and an area of 15,000 square miles. We have 2 adult pediatric trauma bays. They're equipped to handle the most serious injuries. These remain stocked and ready at all times for the arrival of trauma patients. This is the area where trauma patients are quickly assessed and stabilized and then moved on to the next treatment area wherever their needs may require them to go. And then this area is quickly sanitized and prepared for the next trauma patient. This is just an overview of our trauma system response from injury to epidemiology and prevention. We will go over some of these stages in more detail in the following slides. So immediately following a major injury, a patient is brought to the hospital by one of 3 ways. Either they're brought in by a private vehicle or family member, or a ground ambulance, or an air medical team. When a patient is transported by air, ambulance, or ground medical team, the pre-arrival notification is typically given to the emergency department, which allows for the activation of the trauma response system. And there are 2 alerts that we use at Carilion Roanoke Memorial, and there's a trauma alert and there's a gold alert. And specific criteria determines the level of the alert called, which in turn activates specific resources which are anticipated for the injuries of that individual. So here's a list of people who are required to come to the trauma bay when there's an overhead page of a gold alert. So just look at how many of those people there are. When a trauma or a gold alert is called or paged overhead, these people get to the trauma bay before patient arrival, and they have a pre-brief where they communicate individual roles and they review what they know of the injuries so far, and that helps them anticipate the resources and equipment that they will need to get ready. At the same time that this is happening, simultaneously, there's a cascade of events behind the scenes. A CT scanner and a technician, an operating room and its staff are placed on hold, and the blood bank brings down a cooler of gold blood, which is 2 units of O negative uncross-matched blood. And in addition, to assure that the patient moves rapidly through all departments and is placed in the proper nursing unit to optimize care, the administration is notified of anticipated level of hospital care. And then the patient gets there. So then we get the patient. After all of that has happened, when the patient arrives to the trauma bay, there's a systematic approach to trauma assessment. The trauma team performs a very fast full body exam and then initiates treatments such as fluid administration, medication administration, or blood product administration. The team provides trauma providers have organized this protocol known as trauma resuscitation to identify and treat life-threatening injuries as quickly as possible. The goal of the trauma team is to have a patient stabilized and moved on to CT within 20 minutes. And if they're not stable enough to go to CT, then they go emergently to the operating room or interventional radiology. So when the patient goes to the OR or to IR, directly from the trauma bay, they are typically considered unstable and there is need for damage control resuscitation. And just take a look at the individuals on this multidisciplinary team. This is early planning. So the multidisciplinary team approach is taken to ensure that patient-specific needs are met early in the course of the trauma patient's hospitalization. Specialists such as physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, social workers, and dietitians, to name a few, will assess the needs and formulate a treatment plan to assist in recovery. And this will vary depending on the patient's needs and their injuries and requirements. So these people are involved from the start with patient planning to get them out of the hospital safely. Our most severe injuries typically spend time in the ICU, where there's initial social work and case management assessments are often performed. And so, while our surgery team ensures optimal health outcomes, our multidiscipline team, which we saw in the previous slide, incorporates sort of a more holistic approach to ensure that the proper support services are in place for the patient's needs. Once the patient's condition is stabilized and life-threatening interventions are no longer needed, the patient moves to a progressive care unit for nursing care and ongoing monitoring before and discharge planning. Discharge planning for trauma patients can be very difficult because individuals lack resources or good support system at home. So for this reason, patients have social workers who address discharge needs, and they incorporate a case manager when patients are planning to discharge home with services such as home health. Also, I did remove a couple of slides, and one of them discussed that oftentimes patients aren't discharged directly home from the hospital, but they will go to an inpatient rehab or skilled nursing facility or somewhere like the Shepherd Center for traumatic brain injury rehabilitation, and they will organize that type of transitional care as well. To provide comprehensive trauma support, our Carilion has joined the American Trauma Society and the Trauma Survivors Network. We joined in December of 2018. This program is designed to provide a patient-centered and family-centered approach for supporting trauma patients and families as they rebuild their life after injuries. And ideally, the Trauma Survivors Network will be introduced to a patient and family, or family if the patient's not awake, early on in their hospitalization, and then services and opportunities are lifelong through this organization. This information for our statistics is taken directly from our trauma registry, and it identifies the gunshot wound patients admitted to our trauma services. So if you think back to the slide at the beginning where we talked about the area that we cover being so large and being the only level 1 trauma center, many of these numbers may be transferred in from other areas. So this isn't a representation of Roanoke's gunshot victims. So including outside small hospital transfers, these numbers are probably not going to match up with. Anyway, so in March of 2020, this was the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a significant decrease in all patient populations. And you'll see that reflected in this chart. And thinking back on to the protests across the nation in June and July, it is reasonable to suspect that some of the social unrest is reflected in this chart. However, we don't, can't say that for sure. But that's what last year looked like for us. So we've talked about what we do currently for gunshot victims and the planning that we provide for them and services that we provide for them. To talk a little bit about our future planning, our near future planning. We are working with the Roanoke Police Department to do some cross training between the specially trained trauma nurses and the detectives who will most likely be responding to the gun violence to help increase team building and make working together a little bit more comfortable in the trauma bay under high stress situations. And future outreach initiatives include developing a program designed to expose youth, at-risk youth, to the consequences associated with gun violence. This program will be designed to engage youth who are at risk for either becoming victims or victimizing others, with the goal of increasing youth awareness of the consequences of gun violence and plant the seeds for social behavior and problem solving. Ideally, we would be able to take these students from for a brief tour through the hospital from the helipad down to the trauma bay and then to the ICU, and then go over to the sim lab and do a simulated gunshot wound trauma and let them sort of have some hands-on experience in decision making and think about the complications that this individual might face during their rehabilitation. And then end the class with a Stop the Bleed class, which is a nationally recognized program developed after the Sandy Hook shootings to teach the lay public how to stop life-threatening hemorrhage and how to use a tourniquet, and you get a certificate of achievement after that. So the kids will leave with armed, if you will, with the ability to save a life, which is positive. Any questions? And by the way, this plate is available through the DMV. You can have 6 letters. It's $10 for a setup fee and then $10 annually after that. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Arwen. A couple of comments in the chat box. First, just affirmation of this, I think particularly the last program that you mentioned in regarding introducing at-risk youth and high-risk youth to the consequences of gun violence. I know that in particular is something that aligns really beautifully with the work we're doing as in terms of prevention and intervention, and would love to partner with you all in that effort. Joshua Johnson is asking, does the patient's insurance plan or lack thereof affect services available?
So as a nonprofit organization, we do have charity care and the ability to help patients. We don't exclude any services from anybody depending on their insurance. So that's, it might affect their ability after they leave the hospital, but it does not affect their care within the hospital or the services provided while they're here, no.
And I can't speak fully for our rapid response team, city services working group, but it seems to me that part of the conversation that's happened with within that group is this kind of support after a person leaves the hospital, whether it's financial or continuing to connect them to resources following the experience of trauma.
That's correct. And actually, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to have this presentation, so that everyone would be aware of what we are currently providing and what they're provided while they're in the hospital, as well as after discharge. And then that way, if we do work, side by side, that we have sort of a more, continuity of care for these people, instead of offering them things that have already been offered or missing things that maybe weren't offered previously.
Thank you. And Tanya notes that Carillion partnered with Star City Cop Camp,
That's
where
right.
we taught Stop the Bleed and did a mock emergency department trauma resuscitation for the students. That's really great. And you all are, Arwen, I think your presentation is just showing all of the intersections of our work.
Yeah, it's pretty brief. It's a little bit, but it gives you an idea. We've definitely done some other, obviously we've done other outreach things. This is just talking about the gun violence victims that go through the trauma system.
Great. And Decca has made a really important comment that as we continue in this work, not only thank you for your presentation, but differentiating between medical trauma and psychological trauma, and the impact and effect of the through time is really critical. And having addressing both of those over the long term.
Absolutely. And I did want to speak a little bit to that, because that presentation on the trauma-informed care was just so wonderful, and really does tie into what we try to do. Half of this presentation focused on the first maybe couple of hours that they're here. It's a lot of the stuff that's done is done really quickly, but there is a chaplain that arrives to the trauma bay when a gold alert is called. We have a social worker, and they're there for family support. They're there for patient support if the patient's able to be supported in such a way. And that type of thing does continue on throughout their hospitalization. Is always available for them. However, it is this presentation was focused more on the physical trauma than the trauma-informed care aspect of it. But we are certainly on board with that and sensitive to those issues.
Arwen, thank you very much for your presentation. I also work with trauma-informed care, and I like the idea about educating our youth. However, I do think it's important for anyone who's interested in this in terms of vetting, that you really think about the re-traumatization of children who may have seen lost a relative to gun violence, or they've seen someone who they know of someone, a friend or someone in the neighborhood. We talk a lot, when we talk about psychological trauma, we talk a lot about the re-traumatization and how harmful that can be. So I wanted to thank you and just encourage anyone who's interested to really think about the re-traumatization aspect of that in terms of vetting I call them at-promise youth. So just think about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arwen. That was a great and very thorough presentation. Tanya reminds us that Carillion is both an adult and pediatric level 1 trauma center with resources for children and families as well. And I know between the work that that Lloyd is doing through the Reset Grant and the community volunteers, as well as our comprehensive rapid response effort, these are opportunities for us to build that community support for all these ages in partnership with you all at Carillion. So thank you for that. It's awesome. All right, continuing with our wonderful partnership with Carillion, I'm happy to turn to Chris Turnbull. Chris has been working with us to develop a draft marketing and communications plan. And Chris is going to walk us through this today. And this is intended, this is the first time any of you are seeing this. So as you take a look at this with Chris's able leadership, make note of your particular working groups and where the intersection of marketing and communications comes in with the work that you're doing, because we want to make sure that whatever strategy we develop is fully inclusive of each of our key areas. This is not only about communicating the work we're doing as a commission and as community partners, but it's how we message into the greater community and engage the community in messaging and marketing that's focused on prevention and intervention. So Chris, I'm happy to turn it over to you. Thank you for being here today.
That's great. And can you all see my screen? Thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, great. I wanted to take a moment and just, Arwen and her team are very modest in what they do. I've had the opportunity to see that team in action in my role as in public relations here at Carillion. It's like a well-tuned orchestra when a trauma alert or a goal alert is called. And I think there may be a perception in some camps that these folks who work in trauma and critical care are adrenaline junkies. It's nothing like that in the room, right? So I thought I'd add that. It's an impressive group of people. Nobody ever wants to find themselves in a trauma bay for any reason. But if you happen to be there, this is the place you want to be, because the folks there are highly professional, very dedicated to the patient in front of them. And Josh's question about insurance, I can guarantee you that never comes into play as a patient is walking in the room or being rolled into the room. No matter who you are, that's the type of care you're going to get. And that's a really important point and a pride point for a lot of people who work at Carillion. Well, let me move into this. Let me tell you what this is and what it isn't. So I have about 22 years of experience helping to develop marketing and communications plans. What I don't have a whole lot of experience in is addressing gun violence on the front lines. And there's got to be a marriage here of sort of the practical aspects of communicating with the lived experience of individuals who are on the front lines of this every day. So that's what I'm hoping will come out of this initial discussion about the plan. It is not fully vetted, it's not fully fleshed out. I intentionally put draft on here because I want this to be the start of a conversation, not the end of one. And if I can get our screens to move forward, let's see. There we go. So I'm hopefully in the next 10 or 15 minutes going to go through the core aspects of the plan. I want to take a couple breaks in the middle here and there to ask questions of you. And I don't immediately have the chat in front of me, so maybe if Joe would be so kind, as he's been doing throughout the presentation, just to flag me if there's something popping up that needs to be addressed in the comments. Our goal is really to develop a playbook that all of us as partners in this effort can work from as we go forward. And we want to be able, no surprise here, the ultimate goal is to reduce gun violence in the community. We believe we have 3 specific objectives, and these are things that we'd like to be able to measure. So the first objective is being able to decrease lethal and non-lethal incidents. Very great. It's good to see the Roanoke Police Department's data on this. It's something I know we've been following for a while in this group. That's got to continue, and I'd love to continue to make that part of our measure of success in that way. We also want to change young people's perception that they are trapped in some sort of life that will always involve gun violence. And we heard from a lot, as we were developing this initial draft, we heard from a lot of different people that said, if we were able to give people different experiences and show them different avenues, that's an important element of the work that we could do together. We think we can measure that in part using some focus groups with youth groups, young people who are in the school system, and other areas. And we'd be glad to take more ideas on exactly how we can measure that. But we think that's going to be an important success factor for us. And then also ensuring, and Arwen talked well about this, but ensuring that victims have access to knowledge of the support services that are available to them. Not just the ones that are in the hospital, but as they move through life, as Arwen rightly said. Let me pause there for a second. What we try to do with objectives here is be very specific about them, measurable. We want them to be actionable. We want to have a responsibility, and we want to have a time frame. We haven't added the time frame in. But with that in mind, are there other objectives that we're missing, that are absent here? And I will try to bring up my chat box here too. Well, think about that as we move through. Think about it, post your ideas in the chat box as well. Okay. These are some ideas so far about where we think some of the research can come from to enable us to measure our success. So engaging in regular focus groups with city schools, students, after-school programs, youth advisory boards. Of course, the statistics from the Roanoke Police Department are valuable. The community health assessments that Carillion does can also be really helpful. Every 3 years, we're required as part of our nonprofit status to do these community health assessments. It helps Carillion set priorities, health priorities for the community. But what we realized a decade or more ago was that, of course, Carillion can't do all of this by itself. And we have many, I would say dozens of partners who work with us on some of these objectives and help us do the assessment itself so that we're all in this together. So those are valuable as well. There's a Blue Ridge behavioral health assessment that we learned about, and the risk survey that the city schools do on a regular basis. That is also available and it could inform our success there as well.
Chris?
Yeah, please, Joe.
This is Joe. On the Carillion's community health assessment, and I haven't looked at the assessment recently, but does it include information about experiences of violence, or is it more focused on vulnerabilities within particular needs areas within the city?
I need to look at it. I did not look at it right prior to this call. I believe it includes both. I believe the question would be, and it's something that we could consider, I'm sure, how robust each of those sections is and whether or not we could enhance elements of it. I do know that across the country, Carillion is recognized as a leader in these health assessments. They're not the same from community to community. So I think there's some willingness to to expand and evolve that. Looks like there's a question here. While at YHQ, I did encounter students that stated they felt they had no choice but to join gangs. No way out once in. So no way out is an issue. Okay, glad to hear that. That's similar feedback that we heard as we were putting this draft together. And you'll see in some of the strategies and tactics, we think we've started to address that. But please, look at them carefully and give us good feedback. Joe, did you have anything else?
I was just going to add that, one of the things we've given some consideration to is engaging perhaps grad students through Virginia Tech in a focused research effort to bring together these different studies and assessments as they relate to prevention and intervention on reducing gun violence. And as we move forward with community youth assessment this summer, that kind of information is going to be really critical and multifaceted in terms of the different partners that we have in the community and connecting with our youth. So I think this is a good beginning, and that connecting with folks in the research field as students who could help us focus on this could be another win-win addition to this.
I completely agree. And, Radford's criminal justice program may be another good stop.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
As is Roanoke Colleges and Hollins and others. I think they probably would be all good potential partners. Yep. And there's Karen typing in, Joe. What I've also wonder about Roanoke College's public health focus. I think they are turning out great public health majors. As a Roanoke College grad, I would say yes, I think that's true as well. So they could be good partners. Great. Well, let me talk a little bit about the strategies that we've started with. And then I'll break down the tactics that we have by audiences in the next couple slides. And again, not that we have to have it all solved today, but I would be grateful for any feedback, candid feedback that you have. So as we talk through how do we reach the right individuals, what sort of approaches might we take, we came up with several sort of guiding principles. One, we want to capitalize on the partnerships that are already blooming within this group, the task force and the commission. We need to build communications around credible individuals. And that is, you know, and I'm thinking of my own experience here. I would not be a very credible communicator on this topic. I don't have the lived experience. I don't have that connection. Doesn't mean I don't want to learn more or be more involved and really try to understand it better. But I think my capacity to do that is pretty limited. There are people, and we've met some of them through this process, who are very keyed into, have either been around this for much of their lives or they have spent much of their careers working on it. Those, it seems to us, were very credible individuals. And we need to continue to identify those folks because the communication strategy should really focus on their voices as much as possible. We want to use new mediums like TikTok and YouTube in ways that will reach a younger audience, but we also don't want to overlook some of the tried and true methods that have been used for decades and beyond. Flyers, door-to-door work as it's necessary. All of those tactics have relevance in certain circumstances. Grassroots, along those same lines, grassroots communications are going to be important. We talked about that with some of the faith communities. We've also talked about the business communities in the neighborhoods that are particularly impacted by gun violence and gaining some buy-in there in barbershops and salons and nail places, because those individuals are influencers in their community, and building some grassroots efforts around that we thought would be really useful. Think about the times on this next bullet here, regular and consistent communications from the task force and the commission itself. How many times have we as individuals or as members of this group been asked by the media specifically, what's your response to this spate of gun violence or the weekend's shootings that happen? We really need to come to some agreement on what those messages should be, no matter who's speaking to the media, that is, and what action items we might want to give to the community following this. I don't necessarily have those messages in my back pocket right now, but it's something that we as a group should come around and come to terms with and get everybody on the same page. That type of consistent communication will help us ultimately continue to address gun violence. And there, you know, as I mentioned just a minute ago, the calls to action are really important. What do we want people to do? Where do we want them to go for information? Those are the types of things we need to solidify in the next phase of this planning. I'm going to go into the tactics, and I'll break at each of these audiences and see if we can get some feedback from you all. So this is the young people category. It's much more nuanced than that. And in fact, we broke it out into several different age groups because you know, a 12-year-old may be very different than a 20-year-old. A 7-year-old is much different than a 12-year-old. We do need to think about these terms, and I appreciated Tasha's message about trauma-informed care and not re-traumatizing individuals who may have faced some of these experiences. We need to keep that in mind in our communications, and it's something that I made a note of, and we'll add to our plan as a specific consideration as we go forward. Take a look at I'm not going to read these individually, but take a look at the tactics that we've identified so far and the mediums in which we would use to deliver those tactics. And I'll call out a few that really rose to the top. The concept of these field trips where we can expose people to a different type of life than they might be regularly exposed to in their neighborhood or in their friend group. And I'm blanking on the individual who brought that idea to our attention, but he's in Richmond now and was talking about an experience taking inner city youth to the University of Richmond's campus, not for any other reason than to have a picnic and chat with individuals who they may not be familiar with. And if I remember the story correctly, and Joe, please keep me honest, several of those students ultimately went on to higher education, not necessarily at the University of Richmond, but they saw a new path for themselves and saw a new opportunity and were introduced to people who could help them get there. So that was the one that we glommed onto, I think, and really felt was useful and perhaps really impactful in our area. The other one I'll mention is the one that Arwen touched on. We have this incredible STEM lab that is in the old trolley barn behind the Bridges development near Dr. Pepper Park. And we've outfitted the inside of it to be a trauma bay, an operating room, a patient room, and a delivery bay for mother-baby deliveries. And it is a very easy place. It's a much larger room than our trauma bay. You can have people in there. They can witness some of this. They can hear short lectures, experience it themselves, be able to kind of get their own hands dirty, as is the Stop the Bleed training. And Tanya's reminding me, we also have pediatric mannequins that do amazing things that are a little freaky. I'm not gonna lie. It's a little disconcerting, but they're wonderful for educational purposes. And here we go. We have a tactic from Arwen: empower individuals with knowledge and skills to save a life. That is, in talking to our providers, I think Arwen's exactly right. And I even did this with my communications team. Everybody on my team now has CPR and first aid training. I never wanted them to get to a place where they felt like they were helpless. And that gave them that initial, this is what I can do right now, call for help, and I can do this. And it has empowered folks in a big way. I can only imagine it would have a similar effect on some of the audiences we're trying to reach. Great. From Tanya, the kids from Star City Cop Camp love the resuscitation and hands-on stuff afterwards. And similarly we have a Camp Carillion over the summer. Most summers, last summer we did not do it because of COVID, but similarly they really, their brains just really get into the experiential learning. Any other tactics, I'll pause here, any other tactics that folks would like to ask us to add to this plan?
Chris, I think one thing that we is conveyed here, but one of the things we've really tried to focus on, particularly in our working group on gang activity and gang violence reduction, is the focus on opportunity. Encouraging kids to see opportunities other than the ones they feel like they're stuck in or forced to be in. Whether that's through peer pressure or adult pressure outside of parents, or even in vulnerable situations. So opportunity, whether it's economic opportunity, educational opportunity, mentoring opportunities. So I think one of the tactics is to really focus on opportunities. And that's kind of conveyed through here, but it might be that we want to specifically identify that and name that as a tactic.
Yeah, we've almost talked about it, Joe. I think it's a really good point. We've almost talked about it in the negative, where we could flip the conversation and talk about it as a positive. So what we say is alternatives to living a life, and that's something that we heard from a number of people as we were going through this. But on the flip side of that, let's talk about opportunities, pathways for careers and development and all that other stuff. I think I made a note of that as well. All right, well, don't stop there. Here we go. Understanding of conflict and conflict resolution skills. That's a great point too. Thank you, Eddie. I'll make a note of that too. And I would say, at least in my limited experience in this, having the opportunity to role play and do some of these. Here's a scenario that you might have already faced or you might face in the future, and how do we work through that? And forgive me, it might have been Decca, and Decca, you pipe up if it was. We talked about providing tips for finding your person, somebody you can go to get that type of advice and guidance that is a good influence for you. I don't know if you want to add anything, but that I think resonated with a lot of the individuals on this initial planning committee.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, we had talked about, whether that's a teacher or a coach or somebody in your faith community or a grandma down the road, just having one person that you can go to that you feel safe with and can trust, and how important that is for our kids to have those individuals in their circle. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And Chris, to build on something Nicole put in, well, not only Nicole, but sorry, I need to go up to the previous one. In terms of athletics and sports, one of our key strategies through the Gang Violence Comprehensive Plan is to bring together coaches in the community, because they have significant influence in working with youth and children, and bringing them on board with this and hearing from them how we can work together to create that positive that atmosphere. Nicole has mentioned, and that's in part why we're doing this as an interactive conversation today, that some of these programs we're just hearing about them for the first time. And that's why this session's being recorded, so that we can bring these resources to bear and share them out. That's and we intend to do this kind of a process on a fairly regular basis as we're working the plan.
Yeah, and so to add on to that just a little bit, some of these existing programs are excellent. There's also probably opportunity to evolve them based on the impact or rather the input from this group, to make them even more impactful. So I don't want to lose that as well. I think there's, the more feedback and experience that gets rolled into this group, I think the better the programming efforts can become. There'll also be new programs, I think, that'll come out of this to address some of the needs we have. And you'll see even some of the tactics here. I would not say these tactics are fully implemented or even exist currently. Some of them do not, but could, with little effort, I think, be good ways to get to the goals that we have. Let me move to the next one. Again, this is more for victims and families. A little bit of shorter list here, but making sure that mental, and I can't remember who it was earlier. I think Tasha echoed it. Maybe Decca said it, but making sure that we're taking care of the mental health aspects of this as a group, and ensuring that those resources, support services, and others are available, and people are knowledgeable about them when they do face a traumatic incident, like might occur in gun violence. And also, of course, a lot of this can be done in those discharge instructions that we give at the hospital, but that's really, I would say, an interim step. There's a lot to be done prior, hopefully, to keep people out of the hospital. And then there's quite a bit of information to be shared post hospital stay. So there's a lot in here that is not even specified, but are there other things that you would want to add to this list of tactics? And a lot of, I would say, the cities, my kids are in city schools. I know that trauma-informed care is much more a part of that experience now. And so there's all these, there's a lot of efforts that are already being done. I guess the question would be, how do we connect best the efforts across different organizations? I don't have a good answer for that, but I think it's a stated goal for a lot of us in this room, this virtual room. Okay, there's a comprehensive program, this is from Stephen, on Kingian nonviolence that should be considered, involves all aspects and segments of the community in the interest of promoting peace and reducing all violence, working with a lead trainer with plans to introduce the program to Roanoke. That's excellent. I'll add that to the expand the term victim to be a much wider sphere. Yeah, that's a great point too, Eddie. I think victim, in some respects, Carillion views victims as individuals who've been directly impacted by gun violence, meaning they've been shot or have an injury. But it is broader than that, certainly for the community, for people who've witnessed it, for families who've been impacted. That's a great point. So maybe even adding some definitions into the plan would be helpful for us to ensure that we're on the same page. Make a note of that. Okay, I'm knowledgeable. I don't want to take up all of the time here. Let me go to the next one. There we go. Oh, great. Thank you, Armin, for adding those in here too. So business community and church leaders was another audience we felt was really valuable in this effort. And obviously, because many of you are on this call, we actually thought a toolkit might be useful for those groups. It may be the same one, or maybe different ones for different groups. The messages could be, at the top level messages could be the same, but delivered in different ways for different communities. But we felt like that was a useful tactic to get everybody on the same page and provide resources that might be, people might not be fully aware of in different corners of our community. Yep, and Kyle is adding in reaching kids, make sure that we're using visual, make it fun, memes, humor, etc. And I think he's absolutely right. That's going to have to be a key strategy for reaching particularly the younger audiences, but frankly, just about everybody out there. If you think about how you may interact with social media, the things that are funny or more emotive are the ones that are going to get picked up a little bit more. We thought forums, just kind of going to the next tactic, forums would be useful, could be useful. And not that they would have to be segmented in this way, but these are some ideas that came up out of our work, as well as the solidarity walks and some of the other events that, and we'll actually get into that in the next slide as well, but some other events in our community that are maybe more annualized or biannual events. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, making connections with other area clergy, and yeah, the offer is open. If you have other clergy who you all know who would like to be included in some of this work, please reach out to Tim. That's excellent. All right, I'm almost to the end here. I want to make sure we have time for other questions. So just broadly, citizens, and this kind of gets to our approach with perhaps the media, that's really where my core expertise is. I think media briefings occasionally are probably not a bad thing. I know that certain members of the task force, or the commission rather, do talk to different reporters on a regular basis. We may be able, once we have this plan in place, we may be able to make that more regular and more consistent, not just following gun violence incidents, but more regularly. So if there's a quarterly update or a briefing after one of our commission meetings, those are possible tactics if we go a little bit deeper. Neighborhood presentations and neighborhood groups, and I think it's valuable to not just focus on neighborhoods that are experiencing gun violence, but focus on all neighborhoods, so that we're spreading this message widely and people understand their roles throughout the city. And then, as we mentioned here, establishing or more solidifying certain events. I know these ones have happened in the past, the Roanoke Remembers and the Bridging the Community Gap events. Those are areas that I think I would view as low-hanging fruit, and from our tactics, because there's a groundswell of support around some of them already. So don't try to reinvent the wheel, and build off of what already exists. So a couple ideas coming through in the chat here. Would regular quarterly submissions to the commentary page, like opinion pieces, op-eds, even encouraging Dwayne Yancey with the Roanoke Times to do a regular piece or a more regular piece on gun violence and the work that's going on around it. We use those tactics all the time at Carillion. It's something that I would strongly recommend. It's also important to elevate some of those credible voices in our community. And that's something, dirty little secret, not everybody who writes an opinion piece actually does the writing. They endorse it, or they are a factor in developing the content for it, but it's okay to have a strong writer write that and work with a ghost writer, basically, to work with an author to make those points clearly. So keep that in mind. It doesn't always have to be, laying a burden on somebody who's not really comfortable doing the writing. It can be done in a different way to get the point across. And then in addition to that, Ed wrote up, trauma cues often for victims often appear unexpectedly. We should plan to have someone available for crisis intervention. I think that's a great point too. It's talking about the infrastructure that that needs to be in place as we move down some of these communication avenues. And we face that in every organization I've been a part of. Honestly, the community, I mean, I don't mean to say this, but communications is almost the easier part in this mix. If the operations, if the background, the tasks, the implementation is going well, communications becomes very easy. We don't want the communications to get in front of or prompt things that we're not prepared for. So that is always sort of a constant hum in the back of my mind. All right, lastly, what do we need to do next? We'd love your feedback more formally on this. I've taken a number of notes here. I'm sure Joe and others have as well. We do have a working group. We have not set the next meeting up for that, but we believe that's probably the next phase. We also we're going to need a partner to work with us on this. And Joe and I spoke earlier this week about that need. It takes somebody minding the store and ensuring that the trains are running on time to make sure that this work gets done and is implemented. And that is very difficult, at least in the experiences I've had with groups like this. It's very difficult to add that task onto the plates of already very busy individuals. What that doesn't mean, though, is we can't step back from it. Each of us has a role to play, as you see in there, and a responsibility, I think, in helping our community in this way. And I think as the plan comes together, those roles and responsibilities will become more discrete so that we're not laying this on the shoulders of any one or two individuals, but rather spreading the work widely. The concept of many hands make light work, I think, comes to mind here. But we do need somebody sort of as the taskmaster or the project manager to make sure that we're moving down the line on it. I'm particularly interested in, as I know all the other folks who've helped develop this plan over the past few months, we're particularly interested in what you believe is missing at this high level. Once we, the next step is really adding more flesh to the bones here and articulating in more detail how we would get these things done and in what time frame, with what resources, and who would be responsible for doing it. I'm gonna stop there. I've talked way too long, I'm afraid, but I would love feedback from you all, and maybe Joe, I don't know if you have any closing comments on this.
What I'd like to suggest is that we shift to our other working group plans, and as we do that, think about the cross sections with marketing. Some of that's already in process, but with the knowledge base that we have now about this kind of direction we're headed, I think that it's a good lead in to the rest of the work. And please feel free to continue to put things in the chat box. I apologize. I don't know why the video has stopped. The camera has stopped in the room here. I am still here. We're trying to get that remedied, but hopefully you all can still hear me okay. And tech just arrived, so hopefully I won't disappear permanently from this. We're just trying to get the video.
So if you click that, what is that right there? What does it do?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
If you click that, does it do anything?
It says that.
Okay, let's see.
So we're just having camera issues.
Joe, while you're working on that, the one last thing I was going to mention, and this is a request, is we have a document and it has draft on the top of it. And I think it's at a point where if you felt comfortable sharing it, Joe, the rest of this group could weigh in and provide feedback in that way too. We would value that as well as we kind of move into the next phases here.
Yeah, Chris, if if you could resend that to me, I'll send it out to the group as soon as we're done this morning.
I will, and I'll underscore one other thing that you said, which is, I think every one of these working groups on the different aspects of how we're addressing gun violence, I think will likely have priorities that need to be communicated in some way. So to reiterate what Joe said, we want to make sure that what you're doing in your individual groups flows through in this communication strategy as it's appropriate. So keep that in mind, and I'm also taking notes here too. I know I have to hop off a little bit earlier before noon, but I will take notes as long as I'm here and would value feedback from others on that too. So thank you. I'm going to go on mute now, so you don't have to listen to me anymore.
Right. Thank you so much, Chris. And I'm going to bring up the okay, as we move in now to our action plan conversation with all of you as community partners, I wanted to just remind you of a couple things to keep in mind as we're doing this. One is, what are the intersections of effort in our plan that you notice, and how can we best support the plan going forward? Keep that in mind. What gaps do you see? How can we address them in the plan? This is a starting place. This is a plan that we can build on in the years to come, but we're at a point where we need to start, and we've already started to some degree, but that's why you'll see that we're focused on 2 or 3 specific things within each working area to launch. And then what else do you need as a community partner to support and work with us to implement this plan? Is there additional information that you need? As we roll out some of this, we're going to have MOUs with different community partners, all of those typical kinds of things that are part of due diligence and partnering together. So under safer and healthier neighborhoods, again, we've been doing an annual Bridging the Community Gap event in partnership with TAP. We're rolling out the educational video featuring the book, The Little Blue Truck, which it's geared toward kindergarten through 3rd grade, but as an adult, I can appreciate the lessons in it. And we're partnering with Roanoke City Schools to make this available in classrooms. We're looking to continue the annual Roanoke Remembers event, not only as an opportunity to remember, but as an event to provide support to families who've experienced the traumatic effects of violence. The next big thing that's rolling out is the Interactive Community Storytelling Public Art Project that we're doing in collaboration with our neighborhoods and with our Roanoke Arts Commission. We have a couple of artists who've signed on to work with us on this. There are 2 components to it. One is the mobile interactive chalkboard, which will actually move throughout the city, where we will talk with people of all ages, asking open-ended questions about how they perceive safety and health in their neighborhoods and what they'd like to see have happen. The chalkboard's designed for them to write on, to color on, to draw on, to give expressions to their creativity. Those will be photographed and captured and archived. And then the second phase of that is to capture personal stories and interviews that could potentially become part of a GIS map, so that when you click on a neighborhood or an area, you're also hearing the voices of people who live in those neighborhoods. I'm going to pause. Any comments from partners on safer and healthier neighborhoods? Again, this is a starting place, but we're excited about the work that's already happening here. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going, and as always, feel free to put anything in the chat box. Increasing strong community partnerships in education. I'm excited that we are launching a pilot program and the curriculum is positive impact. This has been tested in other places. Family Service of Roanoke Valley is facilitating this. We'll be piloting this with 30 kids in West End Center, Boys and Girls Club, the Presbyterian Community Center. And our goal strategically is to expand the reach of this and to cover this through our, positive action. Thank you, Karen. I'll make that correction. Karen or Tasha or Decca, anything you would add to this as we're thinking about ways to expand this partnership?
The only thing I would add to this, and Becca and I talked about this the other day, is that we are looking at kind of marrying this with communities that care, the communities that cares model. And so again, we're looking into that, and we will have more information as we evolve.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Next area is reducing gang activity, violence, and recidivism. And there's a lot in this area. I appreciate the team that's been working on this. We're about to finish up a comprehensive gang reduction model that will include specific strategies to both raise awareness of and strategies toward reducing gang activity and violence. This includes identifying persons in the community who've emerged from gangs and are working to mentor youth into multiple positive pathways, creating a mentoring team. We will be conducting a community assessment on youth and gang violence probably this summer. We're one of several localities in the state hoping to receiving funding to do this assessment, and we'll be reaching out to you all as partners to help us in this. One of our ultimate goals sooner rather than later is the hiring of a youth and young adult and gang prevention coordinator. And regarding incarceration recidivism, again, we're working to bring together community and regional reentry program stakeholders to see if there's a coordinated comprehensive plan for offender reentry. We have a lot of good partners, TAP, This Valley Works being one, Virginia Cares, the work that Elliot's doing at Dorcas. Research and identify essential reentry program needs for the jail and correctional facilities. Create an education program for employers in the city and the region regarding the benefits of offering a second chance to offenders. There is some case law and new law coming forward that is hopefully going to alleviate some of the burden that incarcerated persons experience with debt regarding child support arrears, not to take away the responsibility, but to make sure that they have the capability to address the arrears in a way that also helps them sustain their life and be an active participant in the community. And then exploring marketing opportunities around promoting the hiring of offenders. Let me check the chat here. Okay. Any comments on that before we move forward? That's a lot of information, but we're going to see a lot of movement in this area this summer.
I have like 30 seconds to try to.
Yeah, we're going to pause for just 30 seconds. Our tech person is going to try and fix the video for the room. So hold on tight for just a second.
All I'm going to do is disconnect this USB. It won't disconnect you from the meeting. You'll be fine. So it will. Reboot the device. Able to the camera. That.
Select that one.
No, it should be. So click on the actual start video icon one more time.
There we go.
We're good.
Am I back?
Can you share your screen and share your video at the same time?
You are back.
Oh, beautiful. All right. Not that that matters, but. All right. Thank you. Okay. Moving right along then. All right, increased coordination of city services and planning. This is to plan and implement a 24-hour rapid response and crisis intervention protocol for gun violence. This was the comprehensive kind of long-term, not immediate as well as longer lasting effort that we're looking at. This is in coordination with the work that's being done through the RESET grant with Lloyd Merchant, Community Mitigation and Volunteer Coordinator, and their team. We're finalizing a comprehensive list of services and resources available to families as we interact with them. This also includes assisting Fed Up, which is an organization of local citizens who've been directly impacted by gun violence, either through injury or the loss of life. And we're working to help them become a 501c3. We want to expand our conflict resolution training. So we're so glad Eddie Smart is with us today. And then in addition, exploring creation of safe houses or building a resource base. As we were talking with Arwen before, you know, if someone, insurance is not a concern when they're in the hospital, but if they need access to additional financial support outside of the hospital, this is where some of this could intersect. And then lastly, Patrick Boaz, so glad that Patrick's here with our Parks and Recreation. They're currently working on revamping how youth athletics are administered here in Roanoke and developing a kind of hybrid plan, which we think is going to better serve the community as a whole and our youth in specific. And we're so glad to have Parks and Rec as a really critical partner in this work. And then the community engagement and media partnerships, we just had a thorough conversation about that. Sorry, I don't know what that was. Sorry, I had a duplication. So I want to talk just briefly kind of here at the conclusion about funding and work moving forward. We have submitted budget recommendations for each of these areas that I just reviewed for inclusion, for possible inclusion in the city 21-22 budget. We're not going to have the amount of money we need to fund all of this, but this money can be utilized to help launch a number of these pilot projects. We're also actively working on applying for several federal and state grants that are focused on gun violence prevention and intervention efforts. We have a team that's meeting this afternoon, in fact, to review a couple that are due by the 1st of May. And we're eager to get moving on those. As I mentioned before, we're one of the localities that will be working to administer a youth and gang violence community assessment. Finally, the working groups, both facilitators and participants, I'd really like for each working group to meet and to the degree that you can, finalize your plans. This includes your SMART goals, how to measure this work by May 7th. This is prior to our next commission meeting so that we can review these. Our focus right now is really activating these great plans that we've been working on and get the word out into the community that this work is underway. Angie O'Brien, who's with me here in the room, she's our Chief Strategy Officer for the city, works out of the city manager's office. She's available to every working group to not only help set up meetings, but to in terms of scheduling, but to host them virtually and can assist with agenda preparation, any documents that need to be shared. And so I want to make sure that, and I'll reach out to you again after this meeting to give you Angie's contact information. So that's what we're doing, why we're doing this. We want to deter high-risk individuals from engaging in violent acts involving firearms. We want to resolve potentially violent or deadly disputes before they occur. We want to connect citizens with opportunities to education, employment, mental health, social Housing and Family Services. And all of this is because we care about our community. And we know that when we make a difference right where we are, the ripple effect of that has a profound impact in a broad-based way. So I'm going to stop the share, and that was a very quick run through of what we're doing. Much of this has been in the works for some time. It is exciting to get to the action phase. Any questions or comments before we finish up today? I will be sending out the marketing communications plan to you all. I don't know if there was anything else I was going to send out. Oh, the data from the police department. I'll send both of those out. And I'm also happy to send out the PowerPoint presentations that Arwen shared with us, as well as Chris. Arwen, if you could resend me your presentation. For some reason, I couldn't open it yesterday. I'm not sure.
Sure, no problem. I'll do that now.
Thank you. Does any of our commissioners have anything you want to add, or anyone in general, before we adjourn for today? Well, thank you all so much. We will keep you posted on our next meeting date. We have not scheduled that yet, but we will notify you of that. And thank you all so much for everything. What a thorough day. Lots of great information. I think we're making incredible progress, and so I commend you all and look forward to the fruit of these efforts. Everybody have a great day.